So, Kathryn, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, I'm thrilled to have you on. And I'm going to start where I usually do, which is
Okay.
at the beginning of yoga for you. So, when did you first find yoga and how did that impact your life?
Yep. I've been just my whole adult life, really. After graduate school, I had my first real speech pathology job, and it was in a hospital, and they had a free gym membership that was attached to the hospital in a small town in East Texas, and there were yoga classes. And I remembered my aunt talking about yoga, and so I thought, well, I'll just try it. And at the end of the classes, the person would do a little progressive relaxation. And after being in graduate school and just suffering from anxiety my whole life, it was such a lovely moment to feel like I was
Mm,
not in a stressful moment. And I felt so good after I finished. That really was, I think, probably the first experience that I had that made me very interested in it. And then, yoga just kind of visited me throughout my adult life. And so there were times when it has come in, and then times when it has just, kind of gone away. But then, when my children were little, they're 13 months apart, and when they were about 5 and 6, I was working in a really stressful job, which I loved, but it was very stressful. And my health was suffering, literally, and my mental health was not very good either. And so I found a place near the children's school and near my house that offered yoga and kung fu. And so I told the children that they were going to kung fu, and they said, but we don't want to. And I said, but you're going because I need to go to yoga. I have to do this. So um, it was a place that allowed me to um, understand that. Let me think about how I want to say this. There were a lot of things in my life, especially as a speech therapist in a school where there are a lot of rules we have to follow, and a lot of things that have to be in a speech therapist. We'll talk more about it, but we often are very detail oriented and are a little type A. Most of us are. So it was in the yoga class, there were choices about how to feel and whether or not to move my body in a certain way. And that was really something that really landed for me. And knowing that it didn't have to look a certain way, it really just meant what it felt like.
yeah, yeah, that's huge. That's huge. I think a lot of us come to it in that way. Like, I was a dance background.
Mhm.
When I came to yoga, it was like, oh, this is how it about how you feel, not how it looks.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I had taken ballet as a young person too, and growing up in a small town in Mississippi, um, it it you know we we are taught to um, you know beauty is a southern thing. It's a thing for a lot of women, and that
Mm-hmm.
was one of mine. But to know that that there it really was about the feeling. Um, and so I started practicing on a more regular basis. And then I started to wonder why I was feeling so good after yoga. Like, because as a speech pathologist, a lot of what I do is think about why we're communicating the way we are, why we're thinking the way we are. And I really like neurology and neuroanatomy and neurophysiology and neurobiology. And so I wanted to know what was happening in my brain. Um, so I did some research and studied and found out some things about what happens in our brain when we meditate and when we do yoga.
Hmm. And what did you find out? What were the things
Um,
that your main
that it
takeaways?
wasn't that well, first of all, that it was real. The changes in my brain were real. It was a felt sense in my body, but I wanted to know if it had a lasting effect in my brain, if it would, in some ways rewire some anxious patterns that I had. And I found that, yes, in fact, there are lots of studies, and probably now more than there were when I started studying about it. So I found out that the longer we are able to stay in this calm state, the stronger the wiring is that keeps us out of our survival state. And when we are able to notice those physical sensations and um, and also stay a little bit more present, then we may have a chance to have a little more space to react.
Yeah. And you know what? I think those of us that practice yoga, we feel those things, but to know like that there's actual neurology, our brains are actually changing when we're doing
Right.
yoga, that is very powerful stuff.
It is. And that the breath also has a lot to do with how we can regulate our bodies. And the yogis knew this. And I love that science can confirm the things that we know and practice in yoga, and people have practiced for thousands of years. But I like that it also has now science backing it up.
Yeah, and the science backing it up, I think, is what's going to get yoga in more schools too, because as more and more kids yoga teachers, we're trying to get it in schools where every single child has access. But they're going to ask, well, what exactly are the benefits? And to have these studies where you're saying, well, this is how it benefits the brain,
Right,
that's,
right.
I think, would make an impact.
Right. Here are the neurological changes that.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is one of the reasons that, as a school-based speech therapist for 15 years, and worked in Austin ISD for years, and loved it, and worked with so many different people and teachers and different families. And then when I took my first yoga teacher training, I began to think, after I learned about the brain connection, I began to think, wow, this kind of seems like something that I could use in speech therapy. I wonder how. And so I made some space in my brain to think about that, and just to kind of leave it as a question that didn't necessarily need an answer, but that would find its way. And one of the ways that I found was through the place I volunteer with, called Bliss Kid Yoga, in Austin. And because Austin is a very wealthy city, it tends to be. Real estate's really expensive here, and affordable living is kind of out of reach for a lot of people. But there are still plenty of people that live here, and so I wanted to, because I'm a yoga teacher and a speech therapist, but I wanted to make sure that I was using yoga for what I felt like it was intended to be. And that was not it's just because you can pay to go to yoga. And so I found Bliss Kid, and someone had already thought of this idea, and it was wonderful. So I took a couple of trainings with them, and one trauma-informed training with them, and started volunteering at a shelter here with another yoga teacher, and teaching pre-K yoga at the shelter. And it confirmed that, yeah, you don't need to pay to be able to do yoga. You don't even need an outfit to do yoga. And those same brain changes can happen. And different brains are different people, but that is beyond a session fee, I guess you would say.
Yeah, that's so beautiful and amazing, because you don't, basically you need a body to do yoga, and in
Mm-hmm.
any form,
Yeah.
and you need to be breathing. So those are the only requirements. We don't need the
Yeah.
fancy yoga clothes. We don't need the yoga mat. We don't need the yoga studio and all of that, which I
No.
think a lot of those are the images we see. So a lot of people really think that, oh, you have to be
Mhm.
skinny and
Mhm.
flexible and all those things. And none of that is true. So
Right.
I'm so glad you found that space. It sounds like you thought of, this should exist, and it did. So
It
Bliss Kids
did.
Yoga.
That's the way a lot of things are in Austin. Like, oh, there should be this, and there are a lot of neat places, and this is one of them. And they provide, free and affordable yoga and trainings to educators and families. And over during COVID, the founder continued their connection with the local school district and providing school yoga after school for some economically disadvantaged schools. So I got to teach pre-K Zoom yoga.
Oh wow. How did that go? How did that go over
it
Zoom
was
with that
it
age?
was well, it was an adventure unto itself. But fun, and 4-year-olds are my people. So I would bring out my little I found on eBay like a little box of Beanie Babies for $20, and you probably have Beanie Babies. There's so many things we can do with them,
Oh yes.
but on Zoom it's not the same as when we use them like to put on our belly for breathing or our back, but you still can put them on your head. But some people didn't have Beanie Babies, but I did find, and sometimes we find out things the hard way. I mean, not in a bad way in this case, but one little guy that would always show up. He wanted he was not gonna let me outdo him with the stuffies, and so many times we took a little trip to his room so he could get some
Mm,
stuffies who needed to join us for
of
yoga.
course. Of course.
So um, yes, I saw lots of laundry piles, which
Right.
my house also has.
Right. Yeah, there was something about during the pandemic, all the Zoom, like seeing other people in their homes and like
Mhm.
the chaos of everyone's home. It was kind of like,
Yeah,
oh, great. Okay.
I know we
We're
are
all in
all
it.
we really are. And so yeah, I enjoyed teaching kid yoga. As it was I also supervised graduate students through this university called University of St. Augustine, and I supervised teletherapy. And so a lot of my day is spent helping students become speech therapists and supervised while they work with 4-year-olds on the computer. so
Wow.
um, so I get to see a lot of 4-year-olds and older, but on the internet,
Right. Well, I
which
want
is
to hear
different than in
about,
person.
oh, it's way different. It's a whole different beast. I
Yeah.
want to hear about your work as a speech pathologist,
Yeah.
and how you kind of got to that path. Why did you decide to go that route with your work? And then
Mhm.
I'd also love to hear about how yoga
Yeah.
started to like become integrated into that.
Absolutely. Um, well, we only have a short amount of time, so I'll be, I'll be. Tell me which path you want me to take longer, and I absolutely will. Well, I'll just tell you first what speech therapy is, and it's different things to different people, but it is a profession, so it's pretty defined.
Mhm.
Um, so it's helping people communicate basically, um, and I come to it in a slightly different way than some people, because I see my role in speech therapy is helping people connect with what they're experiencing. And we right now we are communicating through speech and using language to do that. um, it doesn't mean it has to be in a just the same way as yoga. It doesn't have to be in a certain way, as long as you can make your point and it can be understood. If you want it to be understood, then I can help you with that. But it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect.
Mhm.
That's not what my job is. But it is to help people that have lost speech from a stroke or from some neurological issue, and regain their ability to communicate, hopefully as much as they can. Swallowing is another part
Mhm.
of speech therapy, and that's a big piece. Um, and to help children. who are stuttering, not necessarily stop the stuttering, but find ways to communicate that so they can get their point across and help people understand. And this is a little bit of I guess a little bit of a new way of thinking about things, but for me, I don't stutter and I'm not autistic. And I think that my role as a speech therapist isn't necessarily to make a person that stutters or a person that's autistic fit in to my world, but for me to also try to understand where they're coming from. And as a speech therapist, for me to help other people understand, if I can, that things that I know about autism or things that I know about stuttering, and I try to listen as much as I talk. I don't know if, if that's coming across, but I think that, I don't necessarily have all the answers. And I only know how to help somebody when I can find a way to connect with them.
So have you, a lot of your work has been with the autistic community, in your bio?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Without divulging too much of my personal life, autism is in my personal life. And also after, being a pediatric there, I've been a speech therapist for, I think, about 25 years. One thing about being a speech therapist for me is it is a profession that doesn't involve a lot of math. And math is not my special suit.
Yeah, same.
So I think that it's about 25 years. About 10 of it, 10, 15, no, it would be 10, was with adults and different adult populations. And then about 15 years, maybe longer than that now, with pediatric populations. And there was a little crossover at some point. But when you work for that long and and especially in a school system where I have 50 or 60 children on my caseload, and the incidence of autism is 1 in 58 or 85. It's gone down since I've been a speech therapist. The likelihood of me working with people that are autistic is very high.
So you're at this a school working, so everyone has access to speech therapy that needs it. Is that how it works? Or
it does, since in public school, that's the way the federal law works, and then school districts and state education agencies can regulate how it gets served. But yes, essentially, and there are lots of ins and outs and hoops to jump through, and yeah, I think that if you asked me if everybody got speech therapy that needed it, I would say it would be hard to say yes to that. But I think that with the funding that they have, I think that, they do what they can.
And since you got deeper into your yoga practice, did you see that change how you approach things or techniques that you used?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, just me explaining to you how I approach working with somebody and meeting them where they are, and co-regulating and accepting people's differences, not as other or different, but as part of who they are. Yoga has a lot to do with that. Absolutely.
Yeah, when you were describing it, I'm like, that is yoga right there.
Yeah.
The lens that you're seeing it through is the yoga.
Yeah, ahimsa is a very strong tenet for me in how I carry myself through the world.
And so that comes into your work. Yeah.
I think it was already there, but it just
Totally.
just reinforced it for sure. Yeah.
And it gave you the perspective and language for it too, of like.
It did. It did. Yeah. And I really have found myself, with the interest in neurology and neurobiology, there's a a wonderful psychiatrist whose name is Dan Siegel.
Oh,
I don't know if you know much
yes, I
about
love Dan
him.
Siegel.
So I think that he was one of the people that I studied, in addition to some other people, that helped me understand how the brain works and how we can use mindful ways and tangible ways to meet our kids where they are. And so I
Yeah.
think that Whole Brain Child was and is still a wonderful guide, especially as a parent, because it's got pictures in it, and you can look really
Mm-hmm,
quickly
mm-hmm.
at the
Yeah,
pictures.
actually,
And
that makes me want to take that book out again. I'm like, I should revisit that one. That's
yeah,
anyone listening. If you don't have Dan Siegel's The Whole Brain Child, definitely. If you're a teacher, parent, just get it. You
very
understand people
helpful.
better, I think.
Yeah, in fact, when I was looking at your Instagram page, below it, there was a post that had a picture of batteries, just, batteries, and it had a positive side on one, and then the positive sign, the plus sign on the bottom as well. And it said, batteries don't work when they're all positive. And I
Mm.
thought that was really great. And so I read the post, because it is, I mean, we have to welcome, if we can, we need to welcome as much as we can, even things that are hard. Um, and the person was writing, I wish I could remember who it was, um, mentioned that she was in a stressful situation and that she used Name It to Tame It.
Mm.
One of Dan Siegel, I forget the name of the author, Tina Payne Bryson. She's the other author.
Okay, yes.
Um, uh, Name It to Tame It is one of their strategies that they use when, for children, we can ask them to, when they're able, to tell us how they feel, um, and then maybe we can help them do something about it if they need some help. But for adults, it's also helpful if you are feeling a certain way. If we can say, "I'm feeling nervous about this. I've never had an interview before on a podcast," then that can invite compassion from you, and it can invite compassion from myself, and it also can help the nerves level off a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It can ground you because at least there's a understanding of what it is that you're feeling or your child is
Right?
feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I want to get to your podcast that you're
Mhm.
hosting, the Kids Yoga Adventure.
Yeah.
Um, very excited. I listened to the episodes that have been released. So wonderful. There's really, I've made 2 kids yoga adventures out of all my 80 episodes, and those were like the most work, those ones that I made.
Yes.
But I found that I love the idea of offering a podcast for children to do yoga. So it's not with the screen, it's for them to listen to.
Mhm.
So I wanted to hear about how this came about and how you became involved with this
Yeah.
podcast.
Well, um, even in things that are challenging and awful, in lots of ways, I'm talking about the pandemic in this case. Something good can come out of it. And not always, but something, you can look for something good. You can, most of the time, you can find it. Um, and so the people that are at Tumble Media, Sarah Robertson Lentz and Lindsay Patterson, were both have small children, and they were thinking, how can we um, get our kids to be more active and not in front of a screen, and we love yoga. How can we? And then so they thought, oh, let's make. They already make some podcasts, so let's make a podcast for kids with yoga. And being in Austin, it's easy to find yoga here, um, if you can, for certain populations, and then now with BlissKid for more. So they reached out to BlissKid Yoga and pitched the idea. And Kathryn Banker is the founder, and she thought of Erica Ortiz, who's my writing partner, and myself, because we're both speech therapists. And she thought, well, do you want to give this a try? And here's another way that yoga is helpful, and that is stepping into the unknown. um, having a little bit of trust for the people around me that, I don't know if it's going to work or not, but I love yoga. We love speech therapy. We love finding ways that it can weave in, and helping families and children find ways to connect. Heck yeah, I'm going to do that.
Mhm.
We'll try it for sure. Um, and I had no idea how it was going to turn out, but it's a lot, it's a lot of work. Um, but it's good work.
So you write the scripts with Erica, and then you are the voice on the podcast. And
Right.
so tell me, I wrote to you, I said, I'm like, you have a team. Like for me, I do everything on my own.
Right.
So I'm like, how does that work? I'm just curious to hear, like,
Right.
how does that
Mhm.
collaboration work where you have
So
a group of
yeah,
people?
Sarah Robertson Lintz is the executive producer, and she's also one of the writers. And then Erica and I also write. So it's a lot of collaboration, and um, because Sarah has experience with podcasts for children, especially, they know, and she also has a small child.
Mm.
They know things that are interesting to children that children want to know more about and experience. And so we came up with a long list of things that could be adventurous for children. And then we thought about, well, why would you want to listen to, as a family or as a parent, why would you choose this? Um, and so we decided that there might be some times in our day when we could use it, like when we're waking up, or when we're getting ready to go to sleep, or when we're having some big feelings is another one, or when we want to feel powerful like superheroes. That's one coming up. That's one of my favorites. So connecting with how we might be feeling, which not isn't always, good, bad, their feelings, and then finding ways to get in touch with those, and maybe provide some relief if needed, or at least some breath. That always helps, um, in a playful, fun way.
Absolutely. Well, I think there's 2 out right now. And then is the plan are they going to be released slowly, or is it a weekly
Yeah.
podcast?
Oh, I forgot about the sound that's in it, because it is my voice, but also Marshall Escamilla is our sound design
Oh,
person.
yeah, it sounds
And
great.
it really doesn't it? The ocean sounds really good. And then the
Mm-hmm.
cave sounds in the bear,
Yes.
sleepy bear. Um, that really, I think that it's one thing, and you're a yoga teacher. It's one thing for us to teach a class, and have a really fun connection, whoever we're teaching with. But we don't usually have sound effects when we teach.
Right.
I mean, I make them with my mouth,
Right.
but those aren't always great and effective. But to be able to have this yoga adventure, and then also, because we can't see it, it's just
Yeah.
listening. But wow, doesn't that just turn on the imagination when you can hear the ocean?
Oh, absolutely. I actually want to try the bedtime one tonight with my daughter after we record.
Yeah.
'Cause, yeah, I think she would really like it, and she likes to do meditations before bed to calm
Mhm.
down and stuff like that. So,
Yeah, we tried to put a little bit of one of the practices that I use personally is yoga. There are two ways to say it. I say yoga nidra.
mhm.
Um, and I find that when that is as close to that first experience I had with progressive and relaxation, it really is very, very helpful for me to be able to get into my body and then relax.
Yeah.
Um, and it's an ancient practice, so I think that for that episode we tried to use a little bit of some at least some strategies, or some of the language that helps us get settled.
Right, right. Well, how has the process been? What has been, I guess, you could start with the greatest challenge of
Mhm.
creating the podcast,
Sure.
and then what has been the greatest reward?
Yeah. Um, I wonder if I took notes. I took notes. The greatest challenge is that the unknown, I think. Being patient with something that I've never done before. Um, I think that the greatest challenges that we have are also the greatest gifts. I think that the greatest personal challenges we have are also your special skills that you have. So I think that while it was really hard to kind of dive into the unknown, I ended up learning so much. I mean, I learned what retracts are, where you have to, I can go back if I said the P too loud, I can go back and say it in a different way, which is very speech therapy.
That is very aligned with your work.
Yep. And I learned, I met some really incredible people and got to know them really well, who I wouldn't have known before. Yeah, I got to go to a recording studio. I mean, it was a lovely place, but we had to turn the air conditioner off to record, and this is the summer in Austin, and it's hot. And when we got to go in the recording studio, it was like that little window of time where we were all vaccinated, and it was just Sarah Lentz and I. We were both vaccinated, and I think we were at stage 1 in Austin, so it was as safe as it was going to be. And so I got to see her from like the whole Sarah, and she got to see me, and I'm almost 6 feet tall, and everybody else is short to me. So, so we got to see each other, and but when we record, I like to, and also really long arms, so I like to move around while I'm doing it, because it's no fun to just say the words. I mean, anyway, so it was hot. And I think, and we had to pause a couple of times because for the recording, and this is something I didn't know, that there was some rain and we had to wait for the thunder to pass. So those are some things that I learned. Yeah. And I learned to be patient and have faith and know that it wasn't really all up to me. You're running this by yourself, and you're doing a really incredible job, and a lot of them. And I'm used to doing a lot of things on my own as well. So it was a good experience to know that there were people working just as hard as I was, and that together we made this really cool thing.
Yeah. Oh, well, congratulations to all of you, the team of you, for having that vision, working together, and then, executing it and having it. And I'm so glad you got to do that in person too, in that little window when things were feeling.
It was 3 Saturdays, and that was it. And then everything changed. Yeah. The one thing I left out about the language that we use, because one of the things that Erica and I, being a speech therapist, we're very careful and precise with our words as much as we can be. And when you're teaching yoga to children, and you can often in person, you get to show them what you're doing, and we get to all make the penguin shape, and we get to all jump like rabbits. But if you're describing it on a podcast or a recording, then the language that you use has to be really clear, so that, and also because we want 4 and 5 and 6-year-olds to be able to follow the directions. So the other piece of that is that Erica and I, and through BlissKid, we try to teach in trauma sensitive ways, so that there's choice in what we do. And so when we use some of the language, we say, you might sit on the ground, you might put your legs out, you might cross them. It's up to you, because there's it creates a little bit of agency and control over what you're able to do for yourself. And I think that that's very very powerful for any human, but especially for humans that have experienced some form of trauma or something that doesn't feel safe to them, to be able to say, I don't want to say it like that. And to be able to also know that somebody is doing this with you, like that hopefully when you listen, you hear, you're coming with me, we're going to go together, we're going to do this, that you're not alone, that there are other people around that also can do things with you.
Mm-hmm.
So those are two of the principles that we try to incorporate into it. And then the speech therapy part, because that we can't leave that behind, is that we know that we're teaching young children. And I have little nephews and nieces, and they are some of my favorite people. And we do yoga together when they want to. But I can't help but when we're together, I want us to categorize things, and I want us to talk about describing flowers and use lots of language. And then I want to ask them why questions and all these language things. So when it comes to a yoga podcast, or I want us to be able to go back and talk about what we did. And so at the end of the podcast, that way we worked in, let's talk about what we did. And there's a couple of reasons. And one is because the language aspect is that it's a really important skill for children to be able to tell a story and to explain what happened to them, or explain what they experienced on the playground. If your child fell and hurt her knee, you'd want to know, what happened, and if there was something else that you needed to do. So a child being able to explain what was going on, or a great, awesome story they had, or a dream they had that was incredible. We want to hear all of those things. And sometimes the flip side is called sequencing. The flip side of it is it's following directions. So if I say to you, first, we're going to go to the beach, and then we're going to go and see an octopus, and then we're going to lay on the sand, you're listening to that, and maybe you can start to visualize it. And when we visualize what we maybe haven't even experienced, though, that can create a memory, and that can also create some language and an experience that you can draw on.
Well, it sounds like you've got such a perfect team working together because it's a very, like you mentioned, it's a specific skill set to communicate with children only through the audio, when our children are very accustomed to the screen, or to being isolated for,
Right.
however long it's been, to get that point across. And like you said, I do think those sound effects and the very specific choice of words, it really delivers that and helps kids get to that place. So I hope people check out the podcast, even if you don't have children. If you're a kids yoga teacher, I think it's a really cool way to hear somebody teach in a really effective way too.
Yeah,
That can be
thank you.
integrated.
It's called yogapodcastforkids.com. And I wanted to say one other thing about it, because my dad, he's 80, and I told him about this podcast. What's a podcast? So I told him about the podcast, and he texted me, and he and my stepmother had tried it. And they said, well, we need some pictures. We don't know what are we, octopus? What are we supposed to do with our arms? And I was like, well, do you know what an octopus is? You could do that. But he said we need pictures. And so I said, well, go to the website, because for each episode, when you click on the episode, Sarah Robertson Lentz, Precious Child, has done the poses for each episode.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So you can go in, and one thing I told my dad to
go check out the website.
look at the pictures. They'll help you.
Right.
But I have another friend that's a teacher for special needs children, and she said she was going to try it in the classroom. And I said, sometimes people do need visuals, so it would be okay. I think maybe you could try it by pulling it up on a screen or a computer, and playing it, but then maybe pause it after a couple of, after part of it, just so you can see the pictures. You don't have to go again. It doesn't have to be anything. You can pause it, and maybe even do a little bit. You don't have to do. You just follow what the kiddo wants to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good to know, though, that is an option for visual learners to look at during, before, after, whenever. I'm sure kids will want to
Right.
do these adventures more than one
Yeah.
time too. So.
Well, and it's a language opportunity too, because if you look at the poses, maybe you can remember what you did and what comes next, or maybe you can teach somebody how to do something like, oh, this is how I did it. You can show them your
Right. Yeah, get the confidence. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to hear your kid's yoga gem, and that's how I always round out my episodes. Basically, just a little gem of wisdom that you would offer to anyone who is offering yoga to children. What would that be for you?
That would be that at the root of yoga, the meaning of the word yoga in some form means to connect. And so I think that we use yoga to connect with ourselves and our body, but if we can remember that the reason that we're sharing this yoga is to not only connect with the people we're teaching, but to show them how to connect with themselves and with others in a kind way. Imagine how powerful that is, and showing them in a way that with language and with movement and with breath, that those are all ways that we can all have those things. We can all, those are things that are common that we all have.
It's beautiful. All about connection. Yes. Well, I want people to find the podcast and to find you as well. So can you give us the places where they can find the podcast and maybe Bliss Kids Yoga as well?
Absolutely. Okay. So yogapodcastforkids.com is the website where the photos are. And I think we'll be putting some parent guides and some thoughts about how you might increase, use some language activities and lots of things. And then there's Facebook, is you can find social media, Facebook and Instagram. And then for the podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, I think Stitcher, pretty much most of the places that people find podcasts. It's called Yoga Kids Adventure. Yoga Kids Adventure.
Great. And then Bliss Kids Yoga, is that its own?
Bliss Kid Yoga. I'm just going to make sure that it's not org or .com.
Oh, yeah.
That's in Austin, Texas. It is an org. Bliss, B as in boy, LISS, kid, yoga.org.
Wonderful. Well, I thank you so much for taking the time and for sharing so much with us. I really, really enjoyed talking to you.
Same here, Jessica. This has really been a great experience. Thank you for making the time to let me say all the things and ask great questions.
Oh, absolutely. Well, have a wonderful night and let's stay in touch.
I'd love that. Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.